before we begin, take a moment, because what you're about to witness is not a legend, not a myth, but a real city that once stood at the heart of the Sahara and then vanished. Its streets were walked by traders, scholars, and kings. Its wealth crossed empires. And yet today, the desert keeps its silence. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this channel is dedicated to uncovering histories the world forgot, mysteries buried by time, and truths swallowed by sand. Some stories disappear forever. Others are waiting to be found. Let's begin. In 1076, a merchant caravan stumbled upon something impossible in the Mauritanian desert. Where golden domes once pierced the sky, where 20,000 souls traded salt worth more than gold itself, there was nothing. Just sand, endless sand. The mighty city of Aoudaghost, rival to Timbuktu, jewel of the Ghana Empire, had been completely erased from existence. But here's what they don't tell you. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was genocide. This was revenge. And the man who ordered it, he believed he was doing God's work. What you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about how civilizations die. Because Aoudaghost didn't just disappear. It was murdered, and the evidence of that murder is still buried beneath your feet. Let me take you back to the year 950 AD. Aoudaghost isn't just a city. It's an economic superpower. Arab geographer al-Bakri will later write that its marketplace contains goods from every corner of the known world. But here's what made it truly extraordinary: water. In the middle of the Sahara, Aoudaghost has mastered something no other city has. Underground wells so deep they tap into aquifers that haven't seen daylight in 1,000 years. The Sonic people who built this place aren't lucky. They're engineers, geniuses. They've created orchards that grow figs and dates where nothing should survive. But there's something else about this city that will seal its fate, something that will make powerful men 2,000 miles away plot its destruction. The secret to Aoudaghost power is simple: salt, not gold. Everyone obsesses about West African gold, but in the scorching Sahara, salt is survival itself. Without it, your body shuts down within days. The trans-Saharan trade routes all converge here, because Aoudaghost sits at the crossroads between the salt mines of Tagaza to the north and the gold fields of Bambuk to the south. A single camel load of salt traded here can buy a human life. But Ibn Hakel, the 10th century merchant who visited, writes something chilling in his journal. The wealth of Aoudaghost is so vast that even the slaves wear silk. That detail, that seemingly innocent observation, will haunt this city. Because 500 miles north, in Morocco, a man is reading these words. And he's getting very, very angry. His name is Abdullah ibn Yassin, Berber preacher, religious zealot. And in 1039, he's standing in the Atlas Mountains with 7 followers, plotting to purify Islam across North Africa. The Almoravid movement begins with almost nothing, a handful of men living in a desert ribbit, a fortified monastery. But Ibn Yassin has a gift. He can make people believe that poverty is purity, that violence is righteousness, that conquest is salvation. Within 20 years, he'll command 100,000 warriors. His successor, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, will conquer Morocco, Algeria, and Spain. But before any of that, they need funding. They need a target so wealthy that capturing it will finance their holy war. Al-Bakri's writings about Aoudaghost have reached them, and they've made a decision that will echo through centuries. Aoudaghost technically belongs to the Ghana Empire, one of the most powerful kingdoms in African history. But here's the problem. The city is 500 miles from the capital of Kumbisala. That's 3 weeks by camel. The Ghana Empire's Tunka, their king, has grown complacent. They've been collecting taxes from Aoudaghost for 200 years. They assume the city is untouchable because it's in the desert, because it's fortified, because it would be insane enough to march an army through waterless waste to attack it. The Ghana Empire is making the oldest mistake in military history. They're preparing for the last war, not the next one. And in 1054, something happens that changes everything. A report reaches the Tunka's court. Almoravid scouts have been seen near the northern trade routes. But what the report doesn't say is far more important. The Ghana Empire's intelligence network INSEE's legendary. They have informants in every major city from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. But the Almoravids have figured out how to exploit a critical weakness: religion. See, Aoudaghost is religiously divided. The ruling Sonic elite practice traditional African religions. But over the past century, Arab and Berber Muslim merchants have settled here, and they now control huge sections of the economy. These Muslim minorities have their own mosques, their own judges, their own courts. When Almoravid preachers start arriving in Aoudaghost in the 1050s, they don't look like spies. They look like holy men. And those holy men are conducting reconnaissance, counting soldiers, identifying water sources, and sending encrypted messages north. By 1054, the Almoravids know everything about Aoudaghost defenses. But Ghana knows nothing about what's coming. Spring 1054. Abdullah ibn Yassin assembles 30,000 warriors. Not soldiers, warriors. Men who believe dying in jihad guarantees paradise. They carry minimal supplies: dates, camel milk, weapons. Nothing else. The march to Aoudaghost should be impossible. It's 800 miles through territory where summer temperatures reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The nearest permanent water source is 150 miles from their starting point. Traditional armies would need supply trains, rest periods, months of planning. The Almoravids do it in 40 days. How? They travel only at night. They move in small columns that reunite at pre-arranged coordinates. And they're guided by something the Ghana Empire never anticipated: defectors. Muslim merchants from Aoudaghost who've secretly pledged loyalty to the Almoravid cause are leading them through routes the Sonic don't monitor. By June 1054, 30,000 men are camped 15 miles from Aoudaghost, and the city has no idea they're there. Dawn, June 12, 1054. The women of Aoudaghost are the first to see them. They're drawing water from the northern wells when they notice something on the horizon, a dark line that shouldn't be there. Then the line moves. Within minutes, panic erupts. The city's garrison commander, a man named Tinyabu, has 5,000 soldiers. He's outnumbered 6-1. But he has walls. He has wells. And he knows relief forces from Kumbi Sala will arrive in 3 weeks. All he has to do is hold. What Tinyabu doesn't know, what no one in Aoudaghost knows, is that ibn Yassin has no intention of waiting 3 weeks. He's not here to conquer Aoudaghost. He's here to erase it. And the method he's about to use is so brutal, so calculated, that when historians first discovered evidence of it, they refused to believe it was real. Day 3 of the siege. Ibn Yassin does something unexpected. He offers terms. Surrender the city, convert to Islam, and no one will be harmed. The merchant quarter, the Muslim section, sends representatives begging Tinyabu to accept. But Tinyabu refuses. He's loyal to the Tunka. He believes in Ghana's power. That night, Almoravid engineers begin digging. Not toward the walls, toward the wells. See, Aoudaghost's famous water system is also its greatest vulnerability. The wells are deep, yes, but they all connect to the same underground aquifer. And if you know where the water table lies, if you have detailed maps provided by informants who've lived here for decades, you could do something devastating. The Almoravids start drilling relief tunnels that divert the aquifer's flow away from the city's wells. By day 7, Aoudaghost water level has dropped by half. By day 10, children are dying of thirst. And Tinyabu finally understands. This isn't a siege. It's an execution. Day 12. The Muslim merchant quarter opens its gates from the inside. This isn't salvation, it's selective genocide. The Almoravids pour through, but they don't attack the Muslim neighborhoods. They go straight for the Sonic sections, the traditional quarters, the palace district. Archaeological evidence, discovered in the 1960s by French excavators, tells us what happens next. They found mass burial pits containing hundreds of skeletons. Carbon dating places them precisely at 1054. Trauma analysis shows sword wounds, blunt force trauma, evidence of systematic execution. But here's what's truly horrifying. The skeletons of women and children show signs of being buried alive. The Almoravids didn't just conquer Aoudaghost. They purged it. Ibn Yassin's logic was theological. Any Sonic who hadn't converted was an infidel. Any traditional religious practitioner was worse, an idolater deserving of death. By day 15, 3,000 people are dead, and the survivors face a choice that will destroy what remains of their civilization. The survivors, nearly 17,000 people, are given a choice: convert or die. Most convert, but conversion isn't freedom. Ibn Yassin orders them expelled. They're forced to march south toward the Ghana Empire's heartland with no supplies, no water, no protection. The journey is 500 miles through open desert during summer. Of the 17,000 who leave Aoudaghost, fewer than 4,000 will reach Kumbi Sala alive. Entire families collapse from dehydration within days. The elderly are left behind. Children die in their mother's arms. The sand preserves some of their remains, and modern ground-penetrating radar has detected what researchers believe are the mass graves of these refugees, scattered along the ancient trade route. But this forced march serves a strategic purpose. Ibn Yassin knows that refugees spread terror. Every survivor who reaches a Ghana Empire town tells the same story. The Almoravids show no mercy. Within months, the psychological impact is catastrophic. 3 northern cities surrender without a fight. When news of Aoudaghost fall reaches Kumbi Sala, the Tunka is stunned. His name is Bassi, and he's ruled for 30 years. He immediately mobilizes the imperial army, 50,000 soldiers, the largest force Ghana has ever assembled. But here's the problem. The Ghana Empire's military doctrine is built around heavy infantry and cavalry designed for controlling trade routes and suppressing rebellions. They excel at short, decisive battles. The Almoravids fight differently. They're masters of hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, psychological warfare. When Tunka Bassi's army marches north in 1055, Ibn Yassin doesn't meet them in open battle. He retreats, scorches the earth, poisons the wells. The Ghana army finds itself chasing ghosts through a desert that's actively trying to kill them. After 3 months and 6,000 dead from thirst and heat stroke, Bassi is forced to retreat. It's the beginning of the end. But what happens to Aoudaghost itself is somehow even worse. With Ghana's army in retreat, Ibn Yassin returns to Aoudaghost. But he doesn't rebuild it. He destroys it. Systematically. Deliberately. Every building is demolished. Every well is filled with stone and sand. The orchards are burned. The date palms are cut down. The grain stores are emptied into the desert. Archaeological surveys conducted in 2000 for using satellite imagery revealed something extraordinary. You can still see the geometric patterns where buildings once stood because the ground chemistry is different. The destruction was so thorough that it altered the soil composition permanently. But why? Why not occupy this wealthy city? The answer lies in Ibn Yassin's theology. Aoudaghost represented something he found intolerable. A prosperous African civilization that didn't need Arab or Berber leadership, that practiced impure Islam mixed with traditional beliefs, that refused to submit. By erasing it so completely that future generations would doubt it ever existed, he was sending a message that would echo through North African history. The destruction of Aoudaghost triggers an economic domino effect that historians still study today. The trans-Saharan trade routes immediately shift westward. Caravans that once stopped in Aoudaghost now go to Sijil Massa and Marrakesh. Both controlled by the Almoravids Empire, becomes the wealthiest Islamic state in Africa. But here's what's devastating. The Ghana Empire loses 40% of its customs revenue overnight. Think about that. Nearly half of your government's income vanishes in a single year. Tinyabu, the commander who tried to defend Aoudaghost, survives and makes it back to Kumbi Sala. But instead of being celebrated as a hero who held out against impossible odds, He's executed for failure. The Tunka needs a scapegoat. The empire is fracturing. Provincial governors stop sending taxes. Subject peoples rebel. By 1062, 8 years after Aoudaghost's fall, the Ghana Empire is in a death spiral, and the Almoravids are preparing for the final blow. By 1070, only 16 years after its destruction, Aoudaghost has already become a ghost story. Surviving refugees tell their children about the golden city that was swallowed by the sand. But here's what's eerie. They're not speaking metaphorically. Without maintenance, without the engineers who understood the water systems, without the agricultural knowledge that sustained the orchards, the desert reclaims everything with terrifying speed. Travelers who pass through the area in 1080 report seeing nothing but dunes. The sand isn't just covering Aoudaghost, it's consuming it. Wind patterns funnel desert sand directly into the former city center. By 1100, even the location is uncertain. Cartographers begin marking it with variant names. Aoudaghost, Aoudaghost. Each version slightly different, slightly more uncertain. By 1200, European maps show the region labeled simply Terra Incognita. Unknown land. The city has become a myth. But the story doesn't end there. Because 800 years later, someone is going to find it. Here's the brutal irony. The Almoravid Empire that destroyed Aoudaghost lasts less than a century. Ibn Yasin is killed in battle in 1059. His successor, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, conquers Spain and builds Marrakesh into an architectural marvel. But by 1147, the Almoravids are destroyed by the Almohads, another reformist movement that considers the Almoravids insufficiently pure. It's the exact same cycle. Zealots overthrow pragmatists, then become pragmatists themselves, then get overthrown by new zealots. But here's what's permanent. The destruction of West African trade networks. Before Aoudaghost's fall, African kingdoms controlled the gold trade. After, North African Berber and Arab merchants dominated. The economic balance of power shifts permanently northward. Some economic historians argue that this shift, this single military campaign in 1054, is one of the root causes of Africa's later economic colonization. By destroying Aoudaghost, Ibn Yasin didn't just kill a city. He may have altered the trajectory of an entire continent. Fast forward to 1913. The Sahara is now divided up by European colonial powers. Mauritania is French territory, and a French military officer named Henri Gadin is reading medieval Arabic manuscripts in Dakar. He stumbles across al-Bakri's 11th century description of Aoudaghost. Gadin is fascinated. Could this legendary city still exist somewhere under the sand? He organizes an expedition. But there's a problem. Al-Bakri's geographical descriptions are vague. He mentions Aoudaghost is 15 days south of Sijil Massa by camel caravan. That's a radius of approximately 400 miles. Gadin spends 3 months surveying the desert with a team of Mauritanian guides. They find nothing. The expedition is considered a failure. But Gadin writes something prophetic in his final report. The city may be buried, but sand preserves what it buries. If Aoudaghost exists, it exists intact beneath our feet, waiting. He has no idea how right he is. And he has no idea that it will take another 40 years to prove it. 1949, a British archaeologist named Thurston Shaw is conducting surveys in West Africa. He's not looking for Aoudaghost. He's mapping ancient pottery trade networks. But near the Mauritanian village of Tegdaoust, local herders tell him about a place where the sand bleeds artifacts. After heavy windstorms, they say, the ground reveals pieces of ancient glass, pottery shards, even gold coins. Shaw investigates. What he finds changes everything. The herders are right. There's a debris field stretching over 100 acres. Shaw collects samples and sends them to Oxford for analysis. The results are stunning. The pottery dates to the 10th to 11th centuries. The glass contains chemical signatures consistent with North African manufacturing. And one of the gold coins, barely legible, bears an inscription in Arabic referencing the Ghana Empire. Shaw has found it. Or more accurately, the desert has revealed it. Because here's what's extraordinary. Aoudaghost location wasn't lost. Local Mauritanian communities knew the site existed for centuries. They just didn't know it was legendary Aoudaghost. The discovery isn't finding the city. It's connecting the physical site to the historical record. 1960. Mauritania gains independence from France. One of the new nation's first priorities is archaeological heritage. A joint French-Mauritanian team begins systematic excavations at Aoudaghost. The lead archaeologist is a woman named Denise Robert, and she'll spend the next 30 years slowly revealing Aoudaghost secrets. The work is brutally difficult. Summer temperatures make excavation impossible 6 months of the year. The sand is so fine it infiltrates everything: equipment, notes, lungs. But what they find is extraordinary. The city is preserved exactly as Ibn Yassin left it, mid-destruction. They find houses with cooking pots still on the hearth. They find workshops with half-finished metalwork. They find a school with writing tablets where children were learning Arabic scripture. And then they find the wells. Hundreds of them, all deliberately filled with rubble. Robert's team excavates one completely. It's 127 feet deep, hand-dug through solid rock. The engineering required to create this in the 10th century is staggering. But what haunts Robert is something else. 1973. Robert's team is excavating the northern quarter when they find the first mass grave. It contains 83 individuals. Forensic analysis by physical anthropologist Jean Davis reveals a nightmare. Most died from blunt force trauma, but 7 show evidence of being buried alive: soil in the trachea, defensive wounds on the hands, bodies in contorted positions suggesting they were conscious when interred. The team finds 3 more pits over the next decade. Total death count: over 600 individuals, all from the same temporal period, 1054. This isn't evidence of disease or famine. It's evidence of massacre. Robert fights for years to get these findings published in mainstream archaeological journals. Why? Because in the 1970s, many European academics still cling to the idea that pre-colonial Africa was primitive, that sophisticated Islamic civilization brought order to chaos. The evidence from Aoudaghost proves the opposite. Islamic conquest destroyed sophisticated African civilization. It's a narrative that makes people uncomfortable. But the bones don't lie. 1981. The excavation team finds something that changes the narrative entirely. They uncover a large mosque on the eastern edge of the site. It's intact, completely undamaged. While the rest of Aoudaghost was systematically destroyed, this mosque was preserved. Why? The answer lies in the building itself. Inscriptions on the mihrab, the prayer niche, identify it as built by Almoravid architects immediately after the conquest. But here's what's chilling. The mosque is built directly on top of a traditional Sonic religious structure. Ground-penetrating radar reveals the outlines of the earlier building beneath the mosque's foundations. This wasn't construction. It was erasure. The Almoravids weren't just imposing their religion. They were literally burying African religious traditions under their own monuments. It's cultural genocide in architectural form. But this mosque tells us something else crucial. The site wasn't completely abandoned. A small population, Muslim converts, Almoravid garrison, Arab merchants, remained here for another 50 years before the desert finally won. 1994. A paleoclimatologist named Sharon Nicholson publishes a study that adds another layer to Aoudaghost tragedy. She's been analyzing climate data from the Sahara over the past 3,000 years using tree rings, ice cores, and sediment analysis. What she discovers is devastating. The late 10th century was a period of increasing desertification across the Sahel region. The climate was becoming drier, but it wasn't catastrophic yet. Aoudaghost's wells and sophisticated irrigation could have sustained the city through the drought. Then comes the Almoravid destruction, when they deliberately destroyed the water management systems and killed the engineers who understood them. They didn't just destroy a city, they destroyed centuries of accumulated environmental knowledge. Future settlements in the area never reached Aoudaghost sophistication because that knowledge was lost. The desert didn't swallow Aoudaghost naturally. It swallowed it because humans had broken the systems that held it back. It's a preview of what happens when you destroy infrastructure in marginal environments. 2003. A new threat emerges: looters. Since the 1990s, illicit antiquities trading has exploded. Aoudaghost is remote, poorly guarded, and full of valuable artifacts. Local villagers, many desperately poor, are offered cash for anything they find. Archaeological contexts are destroyed. Objects that could tell us precise information about daily life are ripped from the ground and scattered to private collections worldwide. In 2005, Mauritanian authorities arrest a French art dealer trying to smuggle 40 pounds of gold coins and jewelry out of the country. Under interrogation, he reveals he's been working the Tegdao site for 3 years. He estimates he's removed over $2 million worth of artifacts. Archaeologists calculate the scientific information lost is irreplaceable. But here's the tragic irony. The same forces that destroyed Aoudaghost in 1054, greed, cultural disrespect, external exploitation, are destroying it again 1,000 years later. Some violations echo through time. 2011. A team of geneticists from the University of Dakar obtains permission to analyze DNA from the remains found in the mass burial pits. What they discover rewrites our understanding of who the Aoudaghost people were. The genetic analysis reveals something unexpected. The population was incredibly diverse. They find markers from North Africa, Sub-Saharan West Africa, and even Southern Arabia. This wasn't an ethnically homogeneous city. It was cosmopolitan. Aoudaghost was a melting pot centuries before that term existed. But here's what's heartbreaking. That diversity is what the Almoravids found intolerable. Ibn Yassin's ideology demanded religious and cultural purity. Aoudaghost represented everything he opposed: different peoples, different beliefs, coexisting and prospering. The genetic evidence proves that the destruction wasn't about economics or politics. It was about ideology. It was about eliminating the proof that different cultures could thrive together. That evidence, that possibility, had to be erased. 2016. Mauritania submits Aoudaghost to UNESCO for World Heritage Site consideration. It should be straightforward. The site's historical importance is unquestionable. But the application triggers a fierce debate. Saudi Arabian representatives on the UNESCO committee object. Their argument: designating Aoudaghost would be politically inflammatory because it frames early Islamic expansion negatively. Mauritanian delegates are stunned. They're not making political statements. They're trying to preserve an archaeological site. The debate becomes heated. Senegalese and Malian delegates support Mauritania, arguing that African history shouldn't be censored to avoid offending modern religious sensibilities. The Saudi delegation threatens to withdraw funding. After 3 days of negotiations, a compromise is reached. Aoudaghost is designated a World Heritage Site, but the official description emphasizes its role as a crossroads of trade and culture without specifically mentioning its violent destruction. The truth is preserved in the archaeological record, but the official narrative is sanitized. Some silences are enforced with money. 2019. A team of digital archaeologists from Stanford creates something extraordinary: a complete 3D virtual reconstruction of Aoudaghost based on 50 years of excavation data, architectural analysis, and comparative studies of similar cities. For the first time since 1054, you can walk through Aoudaghost streets. You can see what the marketplace looked like when it was bustling with 20,000 people. You can stand at the base of the Great Well and look up 127 feet to see daylight. The reconstruction uses cutting-edge photogrammetry, LiDAR data, and AI-powered architectural inference. It's scientifically rigorous. Every building, every street, every wall is based on physical evidence. But it's also emotionally overwhelming. The Stanford team includes audio design, market sounds, call to prayer, children playing, water flowing. When you put on a VR headset, you're not studying Aoudaghost. You're experiencing it. And then, in the simulation, you can activate the destruction sequence. You watch as everything you've just experienced is systematically erased. It's unbearable. Several beta testers removed the headsets in tears. That's the power of making history tangible. 2021. Climate scientists begin using Aoudaghost as a case study for modern environmental challenges. Why? Because the pattern is identical. Take a civilization adapted to a marginal environment. Add climate stress, drought, desertification, resource scarcity. Then introduce a catastrophic shock, war, infrastructure destruction, population displacement. The civilization doesn't gradually decline. It collapses suddenly and completely. The parallel to modern Syria is obvious. Years of drought, then civil war, then refugee crisis, then civilizational collapse. Aoudaghost isn't ancient history. It's a blueprint. Dr. Lisa Goddard at Columbia University uses Aoudaghost data in her climate security models. She concludes, when you destroy infrastructure in climate-stressed regions, you don't create temporary setbacks. You create permanent catastrophes. The Sahel region is facing its worst drought in 200 years. Cities across Mauritania, Mali, and Niger are experiencing exactly what Aoudaghost experienced 1,000 years ago. History isn't repeating. We're choosing to let it repeat. 2023. Something unexpected happens. A group of Mauritanian historians begin researching oral traditions among ethnic Saharan communities across West Africa. What they discover is stunning. The story of Aoudaghost never died. It was preserved in griots, songs, in family histories, in genealogies passed down through 50 generations. Communities in Mali, Senegal, and Burkina Faso can trace their ancestry directly to Aoudaghost refugees who survived the 1054 forced march. In June 2023, a delegation of 300 descendants makes a pilgrimage to Aoudaghost. Many are meeting for the first time, discovering their shared heritage. They hold a ceremony at the site, honoring the dead, reclaiming their history. But they're also angry that their story was dismissed as myth for centuries. Angry that their ancestors' suffering was minimized or erased. One speaker, a Malian teacher named Mamadou Keita, says something powerful. They gemmed our city, scattered our people, and erased our story. But we're still here. That's the ultimate resistance. 2024. International pressure mounts on museums and private collectors to return Aoudaghost artifacts. The British Museum holds 15 items. The Louvre has 37. Private collections worldwide contain hundreds more. Mauritania demands repatriation. The museums resist, citing preservation concerns and universal heritage arguments, the same justifications they've used for keeping African and other colonized peoples' artifacts for a century. But something shifts. A coalition of African nations threatens to block all future archaeological cooperation with European institutions that refuse to return looted material. In November 2024, the British Museum announces it will return 7 objects to Mauritania, including 2 gold coins and a ceremonial dagger dated to 1050. It's a fraction of what they hold, but it's a start. When the artifacts arrive in Nouakchott, they're displayed at the National Museum of Mauritania. The opening day draws over 10,000 visitors, the largest turnout in the museum's history. People stand in line for hours just to see objects their ancestors created. Some visitors are angry, others weep, but everyone understands this is about more than objects. It's about acknowledgement. Today, if you visit Aoudaghost, you'll find something that didn't exist 5 years ago, a memorial. It's simple. A stone wall inscribed with names recovered from Arabic records and oral traditions. Names of people who lived in Aoudaghost. Names of people who died defending it. Names that were lost for 1,000 years. The memorial was funded by UNESCO, designed by a Mauritanian architect, and built by local workers. At the dedication ceremony, the architect explained her design. The wall faces north, toward where the Almoravids came from. It's meant to remind us that destruction always comes from somewhere, and it's always justified by someone who believes they're right. Aoudaghost is still being excavated. New discoveries emerge every year. But the deeper truth is already known. Civilizations are fragile. Infrastructure matters. Knowledge can be destroyed faster than it's built. And history doesn't repeat itself. People repeat it by ignoring what history teaches. Here's what makes Aoudaghost's story so dangerous. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Was Ibn Yassin a terrorist or a religious reformer? Modern Islamist movements celebrate the Almoravids as heroes who purified North Africa. But if we apply that same logic to modern contexts, ISIS in Syria, the Taliban in Afghanistan, we recognize it as extremism. So why do we treat 11th century religious violence differently than 21st century religious violence? The answer is uncomfortable. Distance. Time creates moral distance. Aoudaghost is easier to study than Aleppo because we can pretend it's ancient history rather than recognizing it's a modern pattern. But historians who study religious violence across centuries see the pattern clearly. From the Albigensian Crusade to the Rohingya genocide, the justifications are identical. We're purifying, we're defending true faith, we're eliminating corruption. The targets vary: Christians killing Christians, Muslims killing Muslims, Buddhists killing Muslims. But the logic remains constant. Aoudaghost isn't a unique atrocity. It's a template that repeats with horrifying regularity. Remember those 4,000 refugees who survived the forced march to Kumbhi? Their descendants are everywhere. Genetic studies and genealogical research have traced Aoudaghost lineages to over 50 modern communities across West Africa. In Mali's K's region, the Diawara clan maintains oral histories explicitly linking them to Aoudaghost's metalworking guild. In Senegal's Madam region, the Bathily family preserves songs describing their ancestors' escape from the city the desert ate. These aren't vague cultural memories. They're specific, detailed accounts passed through 50 generations. Some families still practice crafts that originated in Aoudaghost. A particular style of silver filigree, a specific method of leather tanning, a unique architectural technique for keeping homes cool. These traditions survive because the people survived. But here's what's painful. Most of these descendants only learned their connection to Aoudaghost in the past 20 years, when archaeological findings were finally integrated with oral traditions. For 9 centuries, they knew they came from somewhere important. They just didn't know their origin story was one of genocide, resilience, and survival. 2018. A bizarre incident highlights how Aoudaghost's erasure continues to haunt us. A tour operator in Morocco begins marketing Aoudaghost tours, guided trips to what they claim is the legendary lost city. They're charging tourists $3,000 per person. The only problem? The site they're showing is completely fake. It's a random collection of ruins 400 miles from the actual Tegdaus site. When Mauritanian authorities protest, the tour company argues that since Aoudaghost's exact location was disputed for centuries, their site is as valid as any other. It's stunningly cynical. They're literally profiting off the city's erasure by claiming that destruction makes all locations equally legitimate. It takes 2 years of legal battles before the tours are shut down. But by then, over 1,000 tourists have visited Aoudaghost and posted photos online. Those images now circulate forever, adding another layer of confusion to Aoudaghost's story. Even in death, the city can't escape exploitation. 2020. Hydrologists studying climate change make a startling discovery. Aoudaghost's ancient aquifer is refilling. Deep ground-penetrating radar surveys reveal that changing precipitation patterns, possibly linked to climate change, are recharging underground water sources that have been dry for centuries. The aquifer that sustained Aoudaghost for 300 years is coming back to life. This raises an astonishing question. Could the site be inhabited again? The Mauritanian government commissions a feasibility study. Engineers determined that with modern drilling technology, you could tap the aquifer and potentially support a small town. But there's fierce debate about whether you should. Environmental groups argue that settling the site would destroy remaining archaeological contexts. Descendants groups argue they have a right to reclaim their ancestral land. Climate scientists point out that in an era of increasing desertification, deliberately settling a marginal desert site is insane. The debate continues. But the fact that we're even having this conversation, that Aoudaghost might rise again, is extraordinary. The desert giveth, the desert taketh away, and sometimes the desert giveth back. 2022. Something unprecedented happens. Aoudaghost enters the global curriculum. Until recently, most world history courses taught in Western schools mentioned sub-Saharan Africa only in the context of slavery. But educators across the US, UK, and Europe began incorporating pre-colonial African civilizations into standard curricula. Aoudaghost becomes a case study, not because it was powerful, though it was, not because it was sophisticated, though it was, but because its destruction and erasure perfectly illustrates how history is manipulated. Teachers use Aoudaghost to demonstrate that lost civilizations aren't lost, they're deliberately forgotten. Students create projects comparing Aoudaghost to other erased histories. Indigenous American cities, Buddhist communities destroyed by Islamic conquest in Afghanistan, Jewish communities destroyed by Christian pogroms in Europe. The pattern is universal. The lesson is uncomfortable but essential. Every civilization believes it's justified when it destroys others. The work of historians is to refuse that justification and preserve the truth. Aoudaghost is no longer just African history. It's human history. 2023. A Mauritanian artist named Ndiaye Ousmane creates an installation called Sand Memory for the Venice Biennale. It's 100 square meters of Saharan sand imported from Aoudaghost, spread on the gallery floor. Embedded in the sand are objects, replicas of Aoudaghost artifacts, fragments of pottery, glass beads, and human bones cast in resin. Gallery visitors walk through, disturbing the sand, inevitably stepping on and burying the objects. Each footstep echoes through hidden speakers, a haunting, amplified crunch. After 3 months, the installation is completely disturbed. Nothing is visible. Everything is buried. Ousmane explains, this is what happened to Aoudaghost. Not by nature, by people walking over it, treating it as if it never mattered, as if no one lived there, as if their lives were sand to be swept aside. The installation wins the Biennale's Golden Lion. Critics call it a masterpiece of conceptual art. But Ousmane is frustrated. I didn't want to make art. I wanted to make people feel what erasure means. Art, it turns out, might be history's last refuge when the archives fail. Here's a question no one wants to answer. How much is the truth worth? Excavating Aoudaghost has cost over $40 million across 60 years. Training archaeologists, conserving artifacts, building museums, conducting research, it's enormously expensive. And Mauritania is one of the world's poorest countries. That $40 million could have built hospitals, schools, water infrastructure. So why spend it on the dead? The cynical answer is tourism revenue. The idealistic answer is cultural heritage. But there's a deeper answer, civilizational memory. Societies that forget how they can be destroyed are societies waiting to be destroyed again. Aoudaghost is a $40 million reminder that prosperous cities can vanish, that religious extremism destroys indiscriminately, that infrastructure matters more than ideology, that diversity is fragile. How much is that lesson worth? Ask yourself, what would you pay to prevent your city from suffering Aoudaghost's fate? That's the economics of memory. It's not about the past. It's about buying insurance for the future. And right now, we're drastically underinsured. 2025, after 65 years of excavation, archaeologists make a decision that shocks the academic community. They're stopping. Not because the work is complete. Aoudaghost is only 40% excavated. They're stopping because continued excavation would cause more harm than preservation. Climate change is accelerating. The Sahara is expanding. Wind erosion is intensifying. What took centuries to bury in the 11th century is being exposed in decades today. But exposure without preservation equals destruction. The team makes a brutal calculation. Excavate now and watch artifacts degrade in storage facilities that can't afford climate control, or rebury what they've found and preserve it for future generations with better technology and more resources. They choose rebury. They spend 6 months carefully covering excavated sections with protective layers, geotextiles, specialized sand, monitoring equipment. They're creating a time capsule. They're betting that 22nd century archaeologists will have the tools and resources we lack today. It's an admission of failure and an act of hope simultaneously. Aoudaghost has been swallowed by the desert twice now. Once by violence, once by choice. Before they rebury the site completely, the team does something unusual. They create a monument, not for tourists, but for the future. It's a sealed vault containing documentation of everything they've learned. Excavation reports, DNA analyses, artifact catalogs, oral histories, climate data. Everything is recorded in multiple formats, digital, analog, and inscribed on laser-etched titanium plates designed to last 10,000 years. They're assuming civilizational collapse. They're preparing for a future where digital archives might be lost, where institutions might fail, where memory might fragment. The titanium plates contain a simple message in Arabic, French, English, and Sonic. Here lies Aoudaghost. 950-1054C. 20,000 people lived here. They built a prosperous city in an impossible place. Religious extremism destroyed it in 15 days. Remember them. Remember how easily civilization dies. Protect what you have. It's a message in a bottle thrown into time. An ancient city warning future civilizations about the fragility they refuse to see in themselves. So here we are. The end of the story. Except it's not the end. Aoudaghost was destroyed 972 years ago, but it's more alive today than it's been in centuries. It's alive in the descendants who reclaimed their history. It's alive in the students who study its lessons. It's alive in the climate models that use it as data. It's alive in the artists who use it to speak about erasure. And it's alive in you, right now, because you know about it. Ibn Yasin thought he could erase Aoudaghost so completely that future generations would never know existed. He failed. The Ghana Empire thought they were invincible. They failed. The colonial powers who dismissed it as myth were wrong. The looters who tried to sell its story for profit were stopped. Every attempt to silence Aoudaghost has failed because the fundamental truth is this. Stories survive. Sometimes they survive in bones. Sometimes in sand. Sometimes in songs passed through 50 generations. But they survive. The desert tried to swallow Aoudaghost. But the city and the people who live there refuse to be forgotten. That refusal, that persistence of memory against annihilation, might be the most powerful force in human history. And as long as we remember, as long as we refuse to let civilizations be erased, they win. Even in death, they win. Remember Aoudaghost.